always appreciate it when I can, somehow convince super busy people to talk to me, so I appreciate it.
Well, so excited to chat.
It's interesting. I was looking at your story, and of course, I want to touch on the book and the reading and everything that you're doing, which is amazing. You've been getting a lot of exposure, and it's kudos to you. But I was really interested in just kind of looking at some of the stuff, particularly that's been written on your website. Great website, by the way. Whoever did the design and stuff, it looks awesome.
Thank you.
Um, you had a post a year in review how I leveled up in 2022, and it was awesome. This was my favorite thing. Like, it really stuck out to me. So I'm going to read just a couple of things here. So there's a few sentences, and I want to ask you some questions on this because this really I love this. So you talk about leveling up, and you say, well, so you're proud of the book, of course, but the deeper story of the heaps of effort, doubt, discomfort, frustration, and grit it took to forge those accomplishments is the real triumph. You say, I showed myself what I was capable of. I've always known that I could write a book. The big questions were whether or not I would prioritize it and what sacrifices I was willing to make in other areas of my life to get it done. Pretty powerful stuff, and the reason I want to bring that up because this is something that I think so many people relate to. And when I see somebody that actually does something they've been thinking about doing for so long, it's pretty inspirational. So when you say like prioritize and sacrifice, just give me a glimpse into what that leap of faith was like. Like what actually had made you do it?
I had a background in journalism and have always
Yeah.
loved writing. So I felt like I could do it and have always wanted to write a book.
Yeah.
But a book I discovered is not a collection of articles. It's its own beast really. And I think that just the magnitude of the project and also the way I wanted to do it. So the book in my mind went through a few different concepts, all related to the same topic.
Yeah.
But at one point, it was 101 ways to raise a reader, which is very, quick tips if you're giving people 101 things to do. But when I really thought about writing a book that was ambitious, impactful, something that people could read, and it was evidence based, but also simple enough that they would do the things that mattered, and then also a book that could really have an impact in terms of the whole trajectory of kids' lives. Like to write that book to me felt very big, and it felt like I'd have to clear my plate of a lot of distractions and other things that I've been doing for years.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So what I guess what was that moment? Did you so you've always wanted to write your own book. And then finally you get to the point where, okay, this is the book. I'm gonna do this. And obviously your kids must have had a pretty big impact on that decision. Like what lessons would you teach your kids, or what are you going to tell them about that journey that you went on that would help them along the way? Looking at, I guess, at young Maya, what would you tell yourself?
I would tell myself and I would tell my daughter, who fortunately was old enough to see the unfolding of the book over time. But I would tell her that it's okay to focus on one really important thing to you that is hard and takes a long time to complete. And it's okay to say no to all of those other things that are wonderful and also important. So for me to make the time and space to conduct all the interviews and do the research and sit down and write to do the book, I had to say no to a lot of volunteer work that I did in the same exact space. So work with libraries and literacy coalitions. And so they were things that felt prior to really buckling down with the book, those things felt more urgent because it felt like there were people waiting for me. There were people expecting me at meetings or who needed me to do this thing or weigh in on that thing. And so I think the lesson is once you're convinced that there's this greater purpose or mission that you have, it's okay to be selective about how you fulfill your own mission. So for me, it was okay to say, I'm going to sit down and write this concrete thing that down the road, thousands of people can read and benefit from instead of frittering away all my time on these other things that feel more urgent and impactful in the moment, but I know for a fact aren't going to have the lasting impact. And then there's this in the beginning, the hurdle you have to get over is that there's no one waiting for it. No one was waiting for this book from me.
Yeah.
Nobody knew. Nobody else knew what it was, what it could be, what it,
Yeah.
so I had to get past that initial just betting on yourself piece. And then
Yeah,
you find those people who do believe in the vision and support you. And so
yeah,
Ryan Holiday who's an author that I met in Austin, was a big, played a big role in
yeah. I
this.
saw his right up in your it was on Amazon or in your book. Yeah, I've got a bunch of his stuff. He's a great writer.
And so he was someone who advocated for the project and for me as an author in ways that he didn't have to.
Yeah,
But so you find your people, and then that it every supporter kind of helps you take the next step until it is an actual book that a publisher has bought, and then you do have someone waiting for it in a deadline.
no, that's awesome. So let's talk about the book for a second. Do you feel like you're on a mission now?
I'm focused on the message that's in the book and the advice that's in the book, but not overly focused on the package of the book, if that
Sure.
makes sense. So I'm definitely still trying to sell the book.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Definitely still doing speeches and workshops and trainings related to the content of the book. But going forward, I see myself finding more ways to get other people jazzed about those ideas and those concepts and taking them to their own communities in
Sure.
kind of grassroots ways. The format for this message for everyone isn't 240 pages and a couple
Right.
hundred in notes referring to academic articles. Like
Yeah,
that's not the medium for everyone. And so I'm interested in how do we reach people where they are. I'm interested in sort of public installations and animating public spaces to help parents learn how to teach some of these things in everyday life. So, what might it look like to create an interactive playscape in a
hmm,
park that embeds letter teaching principles? Or what would it look like? Of one organization I love, there's a Laundry Cares Laundry Literacy Coalition that puts books and literacy pointers for parents and laundromats because families are there for 2 hours
yeah, yeah. Very
doing
smart.
laundry. So how do we animate public spaces and just make literacy learning a part of how people navigate their days and how families play with kids? So I'm interested in all kinds of different ways, but ways that are durable and ways that educate people about the principles of quality reading instruction and the role that parents can play in it. So I think I'm very much in the parent space, very much in the community space, but the book is kind of like just a point of departure. That was like getting my thoughts together.
Yeah. No, it's great. That's really smart. I mean, that whole laundromat idea is just when you think about areas that make it more convenient to actually implement some of these things. And I was reading something where you were talking about, or maybe it was a news interview that you were on, but you were talking about the way that to describe things, even if you're not reading, like to a child, right? If you're outside and really being thoughtful about the way that you're describing things. And I thought that was really interesting, because I look back and I guess hindsight's always 2020, some of the things that I would do different as a parent, right? Which is probably a pretty big laundry list at this point. And I think I did a pretty good job, but it is interesting how, well, first of all, how fast time flies when you have kids. I think that's something that I really, especially now with high school kids. I mean, I still can't believe I have high school kids. It's so weird, But the idea of being intentional with their learning, and you had said, I think it was one of these posts. You were shocked to discover that a good education in America is a long shot, right? And I totally agree with that. I mean, did that was it? I guess what shocked you about it?
I think because I didn't know I was in a small minority of people that had wonderful educational experiences. Like I went to two different great preschools. One was my mom worked at Kent State University her whole career. So I went
Wow.
to the
Yeah.
little preschool that was on campus. And another friend prior to that was running a really high quality program that I went to. And then I went to a wonderful Catholic school for kindergarten where I remember those reading lessons and
Yeah.
being in the advanced group at that point. And then I went all the way through Akron Public Schools from first through 12th grade. And in all of those spaces, I excelled and I had the foundation and it went smoothly for me, liked school, went on to Harvard and
Mhm.
journalism school and all these other things. But that is the minority of kids, even in the same schools and classrooms that I was in, everyone wasn't having that same experience. And so it wasn't until I was a parent and was reading articles and discovering that most kids don't even read well. So it's not even a matter of them not, acing AP chemistry or whatever thing it might be. It's literally being in high school and reading at a 3rd or 4th grade level. If that so just those sheer numbers of kids who are struggling in so many places, and then also having the insight at this point, I was in Austin, Texas, and just, discovered how much money a lot of people were spending on tutoring, some because kids were behind and weren't getting what they needed in schools, but some as, like, enrichment. So spending to get kids ahead. And so all of these factors kind of play into our educational ecosystem. And so it's like, wow, if you have to spend all this money outside of school, many kids to get some of these results, the school can't even be credited for that third of kids who
Yeah.
are reading well. So it's just like all these little epiphanies and data points. And I'm like, this is a major, major problem. And I don't think most parents know that. They think you take your child to school and they'll be taught to read at a minimum.
Yeah, it is really interesting, and I'd never thought about it. I mean, just hearing you talk about it. I mean, both of my kids have been in sports. I think we were emailing back and forth, us, about the soccer stuff a little bit, um, and that has been watching my kids go through sports has been an eye opener because you don't really realize the disparity, right, in terms of opportunities until you I guess get to a point where I mean, because when my daughter started to look at colleges and yeah, she's played club sports her whole life and all that, and you start to think like the reality is in a lot of sports. I know for soccer for sure, like if you don't have those opportunities early on to play club, which is very expensive. I mean, this stuff is not cheap, and but if you don't do that, good luck keeping up. And so hearing you talk for sure. Because you see a lot of these learning centers popping up for everything from math to engineering to, and that is one of those things where the gap starts to widen a little bit, right? I mean, how do you think this plays out, like as a community, to get everybody kind of to lift up and have renewed opportunities?
I think we have to, even though it's hard and it's challenging and it doesn't feel scalable to reach every parent in every household and give them these tools and skills. I think that's why it's so important, those kind of like public ways of teaching these many lessons
Yeah.
and also emphasizing to parents that it has an extraordinary impact the way that they talk with babies and toddlers and preschoolers. That talk alone, if you introduce your child to the words you do know, label the things in their environment, just get in the habit of listening and responding to their coos and babbles. And that if people knew that those little things had such an impact, every parent, even parents who had terrible school experiences, even parents who themselves are not great readers, which there are millions and millions and millions, tens of millions of adults with poor reading skills. Anyone can do the basic things, and it does have an impact. And then we could strengthen our early childhood education system so that more kids have access to high quality preschools, where again, the people who work there are paid well enough and trained well enough that they can also have those back and forth conversations
Yeah. Yeah.
that build kids up. And then I think there needs to be serious, serious investment in teacher and tutor training, because you don't have to be a certified teacher in order to teach a child to read. So even tutoring programs that really teach people an explicit, direct, systematic way of helping kids learn to read, if we scale those things up and make them more publicly accessible, that would do the job. And people don't want to hear it. They want schools to do everything.
Right. Right.
But I think it would be a triumph if we got reading right, because once kids can read, they can access the materials and information to learn anything else they might need to know. And those foundations of oral language and conversation is so helpful for math also. People don't realize that when you're cooking or doing a recipe and you're talking about we have more of this or less of that and comparing things, that all of that math language is helpful for building concepts and knowledge as well.
Yeah, I think another part of it too is confidence, right? Especially when you're young. If you everybody is going through it, right? Depending on where you're at, and if you're young, like your book is obviously Birth to Six, like in that gap, like you feel smart and feel very confident if you can read and identify things and speak well and say words that some of your peers can't. And I think that for sure carries over into everything that you're talking about. Everything in life. If you feel good about yourself and feel like you are a confident person, then these things that to others may seem unachievable. Or I remember my kids going through school, and it was always like it amazed me how quickly the schools put kids in categories. You know what I mean? And then those kids, I was very fortunate. My girls did very well, but their friends would come over, and they started to like identify in these categories. Like I'm not in AP. You start to think like that's just not me. I'm not capable of that. And yeah, I think the sooner that you can get after it, the better for sure. What do you think about digital? Are you seeing, I guess, in the research that you did? Well, first of all, how do you feel that's impacting the youth, particularly that category that is in your book, right? Birth to Six. And did you find any studies that really have shown an impact of what that is doing, good, bad, or otherwise?
There are a couple impacts when you think about the particularly the younger kids. One is the parents' habits of technology use and how that impacts the parents' engagement, presence, attention to the child, and the length and frequency of those back and forth exchanges. And so that's one piece. Like if the parent of an infant is glued to their phone, then they're not making the eye contact. They're not seeing where the baby's gazing or they're pointing or all of those things. So we model it, we buy the technology. So it definitely all starts with
Right.
us, even though these are these big, it seems like they're these big, irresistible social forces that put phones in the kids' hands. It's like, no, it's parents putting phones in the kids' hands. And then the research indicates, and the American Academy of Pediatrics has guidelines about this as well, but the littlest ones, like 2 and under, aren't getting anything, learning anything if you're just handing them a
Yeah.
device. Even if you have an educational app up and you think they're looking at letters and learning something, it's just not a board book is for a baby is really an incredibly sophisticated technology. When they're
Yeah.
chewing it and throwing it, they're learning so many sensory things that are important. And a board book is interesting to a baby. They're looking at the faces, they're looking at the colors, they're learning to turn pages and all those things. And then with the older ones, we just haven't gotten to a point yet, I don't think, where any technology can replace the responsiveness of a parent in conversation with their child about a book.
Yeah. Very true. I mean, where do you stand on a physical book versus something on digital? Like I'm a parent reading on a Kindle versus a physical book.
I think that they're one benefit of ebooks for kids. This is once they're older, so they're, let's say they're elementary
Yeah.
age, is access to a variety of texts. Because sort of you get to a point once they can read, once they've mastered those basics, where they just need to get their reps up. And sometimes the books that are immediately available in your home, or if it was during COVID and you couldn't go to the library and you maybe didn't have the money to order a bunch of books to be delivered, ebooks offer an inexpensive access to a range of things. So, and it also offers sophisticated algorithms for finding more of what you've liked. So if there's a kid who read, some fantasy book with a certain kind of protagonist navigating some kind of world, they read that one and the machine is going to send them recommendations
Yeah.
for other things. So I think once you can read, it doesn't matter if it's paper or digital, but in the learning to read process, what they need are people paying attention, interacting with them, asking questions, checking their comprehension. And it's like more like the back and forth around the book
Yeah.
that's so valuable.
So what have you like? I think I was watching an interview with you, and you clearly were very fortunate with. It sounds like remarkable parents. right? And you were talking about your dad a little bit, and it always makes me think about like legacy. And I, I ask this to a lot of people, like, do you think about kind of legacy, and are you very aware of what you're doing, and thinking like long term, like the impact that you're leaving, or what you're trying to leave? Is that something that you think about, or are you just really in the work?
I think of it as, I think of it very present tense. Like I do think I'm very intentional.
Hmm.
Like I have a strong belief that what I do today, that it matters. Some people say, "Oh, nothing matters. We're just specks in the universe."
Yeah.
Well, and I was like, that to me is like very demotivating. If I'm just a speck in the universe. What am I doing?
Yeah.
I can just kind of like float around. So I do feel like as a result of, you mentioned my parents who are amazing. Um, my dad has passed away, but my mom is still here and she continues to be amazing.
Yeah.
But I just feel like it makes a difference. Like if I had different parents, I'd be in a different place, not necessarily better or worse, but different. So I'm like, if you have all these hours when you're awake, why wouldn't you try to put some thought into doing something that matters
Yeah.
into it? I do think a lot about making the right decisions with my daughter. Like I'm just not casual about it at all. And so sometimes she feels like her father and I like don't trust her as much as other parents trust their kids
Yeah.
because she doesn't have a phone or she
Right.
doesn't have
Yeah.
this access. She can't go on TikTok or whatever. I was like, no, it's just we're making different choices based on our understanding of the world and the dangers of, whatever the particular thing that she's not allowed to do.
Yeah. That's funny. No,
So
that's
very
that,
intentional with her.
yeah, that's great. I mean, it's so with the book, right? So Reading for Our Lives, a literacy action plan from birth to six, and I'll link to it and all that. I love. I mean, man, I don't know, the art and everything else behind you there, um, is great. What like, so people that are curious, obviously they can read about it, but what do you think if you had to kind of pull out like the biggest takeaway, right? Is that a loaded question? But like a takeaway, like, for a parent that is interested in gaining this knowledge and kind of helping their kids, what are they going to learn? Like, what's the big takeaway from Reading for Our Lives?
I think I tried to get, you mentioned the cover, all the big things in there, so the urgency. So I was like, what is the most dramatic title? So it's not
Yeah.
101 ways to raise a reader. It's like we're
Yeah.
reading for our lives. There's so much research about how low literacy adversely affects people's health outcomes, their likelihood of incarceration, their job prospects, earning potential. So it's not reading just to love literature or to look smart. It's like there are real concrete implications for your health and everything that matters. All relates to your ability to read. And not necessarily to be the best reader ever. There are levels of this, but to get to the point
Yeah.
where you can understand the legal documents you're signing and be informed in the decisions you're making in your life. So I think though a big takeaway is just the urgency. And then in the subtitle, I tried to make the connection that these early things matter way more than we realize because no one ever tells us that having back and forth conversational exchanges with your 18 to 24-month-old is going to have an impact on their vocabulary size, their verbal expressive skills, and even their IQ when they're middle schoolers. No one tells parents that. So we aren't fully aware of our power. And if we don't know we have this power, we're not going to exercise it. A lot of people do it by accident.
Yeah.
So I had two very talkative parents. I'm so thankful.
Yeah.
But I'm more of a quiet, bookish person. So my daughter may not have gotten the language nutrition she needed if it wasn't for talkative grandparents and my talkative husband and other things. But I didn't know. And so some people aren't talking as much as they could because they don't know. Some aren't talking because culturally they think children are supposed to be quiet in the presence of
Sure.
adults. So they don't know that kids need to have all those opportunities to answer questions and think and talk and verbalize.
Your parents had some foresight, right? I mean, naming you Maya. right? So after Maya Angelou, which I love that. I wonder if that kind of, put a little, planted a seed, so to speak.
I think it absolutely did.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting how things shake out. I mean, Maya Angelou, it's one of those, um, I've used that quote in business talks, quite a bit about how you make people feel. She always said they'll forget about what you said, but not, no one will ever forget about how you made them feel. And that's so true. When you look back on anything, it's those teachers that you had, it's that one person that, in throughout a lifetime, I don't know what the number is, but it's a big number of people that we encounter on a daily basis, right? On a lifetime basis. But at the end, as you get older, when you're with friends, it's like a handful of people you can pick out that are like, man, they made me feel good, or they taught me this, or it made an impact on my life. And I think it's interesting that your parents named you that, and you're doing what you do now, because it's you're definitely following in those footsteps, and it's really cool to see.
And then I had a couple of early experiences with teachers that were like small things, but I'm 42 years old and I still remember these things
Yeah.
from first and second grade. So I had teacher Miss Harpley, who we all made books in her class. And I think I had her in first grade and fifth grade or something. So I don't remember exactly which year we made these books, but I think it was in first grade. And they were made out of like cardboard and wallpaper samples, but they were little books that we made and they felt substantial. They felt like hardcover
Yeah.
books, and we like taped pictures of ourselves, and they had titles and then, our little drawings and pictures and stuff inside. So pretty much since that elementary school experience, I have felt like I'm an author. I have this book. So that was one little thing. And then when I was in second grade, I remember writing a story just as a part of an assignment. And that teacher was Miss Rodner. And I remember her writing this comment that she was so impressed that I wrote the story in first person. So I don't know what it
Hmm.
was, why that of all things stuck with me all these years, but it was, to your point, it was the feeling that I had something special when it
Yeah.
came to writing and storytelling. So pretty much after second grade, you couldn't tell me that I wasn't gonna write a book once I set my mind to it.
But I mean, it is. I mean, you're tackling a huge, a monumental uh, challenge to say the least. And it's, I mean, kudos to you for taking the steps to make it happen.
And thank you. I think another gift that my dad in particular gave me was like the ability to receive a compliment
Huh,
or
interesting.
or to like hang on to positive things. Because if you think about like many kids got positive
Yeah,
comments of some kind at some point, but some people kind of like deflect, whereas I'll hang on to it and
that's
receive it. And I think that's super helpful.
no, that's amazing. Like, so what do you think that is? Like, what
I
do you?
don't know. I wish I had been able to ask my dad, but I think he modeled it in some ways.
Yeah,
Um he like you listen to criticism and you kind of run it through your filter and take the lessons that you can from it, but like let the good stuff stick.
yeah,
Also, not like to like make you, I don't know, arrogant or something,
sure.
but life is hard, so hang on to some of these good things
Yeah,
to
for
help
sure.
you take the next step.
For sure, for sure. Well, thanks for taking the time. I want to be respectful of your time. I'm excited for you. I mean, you've got an amazing background. I mean, everything from Harvard to Northwestern. I was reading, I was like, whoa, I'm gonna have to step my vocabulary game up here. It's impressive, and it's exciting to see someone like you doing the things that you're doing, especially in the community. I love your focus and just some of the ideas too. I never thought of going back to you talking about like the laundromat and kind of making it just more available and a part of how we do things as a community. It'll be really interesting to see how things shake out. But I have full confidence that whatever you do, it's probably going to be good.
Well, thank you so much for your time today and for this chat. It's been wonderful. Got to dig up some old stories and reflect on some good memories.
Of course. Thanks a lot, man. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks. Bye bye.